Deadlock just got a sizable balance patch, tweaking gameplay mechanics and adjusting 33 different heroes in the game, including various things like Midboss now being spawned in from the start of games, rush the Midboss as soon as the game starts, he can't stop us all, to the Soul Earn's gameplay mechanics being vastly overhauled, with it now spawning in on the side lanes and allowing use of abilities whilst it's being carried, with a fight over a King of the Hills style delivery point at the middle bridge when you try and deposit it. Apollo and Celeste have both received hitbox improvements with tweaks to make them easier to hit and make them more accurate to their character models. The base HP of all heroes in the game has been reduced by 10, with the HP per boon also going down by 3. Two collective changes that should stop a bit of the vitality bloat in the game right now. However, we did see vitality buffs in some form for Holliday, Venator, and Billy, whilst Apollo looks on devastated as his HP regen was nerfed. Weapon-wise though, many powerful spirit heroes that have been ruining people's lives with gun builds have had their weapons nerfed in some capacity in this patch too, alongside a couple heroes whose bullets have been shredding through foes, also getting reductions in DPS. Map-wise, breakables will now spawn in a minute later at the 3-minute mark, with medium jungle camps spawning in a minute earlier at 5 minutes. And two of the map's bounce pad rotation options have been removed to encourage better macro. However, the hero move speed diminishing cap was increased from 11 to 12, meaning there's now slightly less aggressive diminishing returns on movement speed investment. And we've even gotten a new vitality item, Grit. This 800 soul cost barrier item is an active that will provide a small shield on a reasonable cooldown. However, it has a huge upgrade path and acts as a component for many different items. Talking of items, there's notable changes there too. It's a whole new world of movement options for Magic Carpet enjoyers, with it now giving you negative gravity and increased air control. Melee is being encouraged more than ever as well, with Spirit Snatch and Melee Charge getting some decent buffs. Arctic Blast will now freeze your foes so much that they'll be unable to regenerate stamina under its effects. And all three of the item shop investment trees have also gotten a new 6.4k soul spent power spike, with the investment reward structure rebalanced in all of those categories to compensate for the new reward. Valve even adjusted ropes and zip lines to tighten up inputs and interactions when using them around the cursed apple. And if you've ever had your abilities or items blocked from saving a teammate due to them walking through a veil, don't fear, they've fixed many broken interactions that were being blocked by teammates being on the other side of a veil, alongside many other great quality of life tweaks inside of this patch. And that is only scratching the surface, so let's kick off tonight's episode of Patch Notice and delve deeper into the update. As always, I'm your host Jackie from Dead Air, and you're watching Patch Notice. Myself and Daisy have been grinding away to get our high quality coverage of the update to you as quickly as possible, so don't forget to subscribe to Dead Air if you enjoy our videos and want to know every time we upload. With that said, let's start with the hero changes. Detective Abrams is up first. His third passive ability, Infernal Resilience, has gotten some tweaks in tonight's patch. The Tier 1 AP reward has been changed from granting 1.5 health regeneration to instead giving him an additional 200 max HP. And the Tier 2 AP upgrade will now grant you plus 18% melee lifesteal, with 40% effectiveness against NPCs, instead of granting the aforementioned 200 max health. So some nice upgrades there. Additionally, his ultimate ability, Seismic Impact, had two changes. The Tier 2 AP reward stun duration was increased by 0.1 seconds of duration, now granting you plus 0.8 seconds of stun. Alongside that, the Unstoppable granted on cast with the Tier 3 AP upgrade will now also last a full second longer, being upped from 5 seconds to 6 seconds of duration. Jumping away from Abrams and dropping into the notes next is Apollo. Firstly, let's have a comparison of the new and improved Apollo hitbox. As you can see, the older hitbox didn't provide full coverage in a few key areas, notably the mid portion of his model and towards the shoulders and slimmer areas of his character model. The new hitbox has been made far more generous in covering these areas, and should make it easier to land consistent hits on the hero. This is one of a very small collection of instances we've seen a hero model hitbox be updated in Deadlock to date. Hitboxes aside though, as Billy sprays a few clips into Apollo, let's talk about his HP regeneration. His base regen was reduced from 2 HP to 1 HP. The more significant changes though are related to his kit, with some kneecapping nerfs to the smug Ixion. Riposte is no longer a get out of jail free card, and it's now actually a counter attack. It will no longer automatically cause Apollo to dash forward when procced. Instead, it will give you the option to counter-attack the target if you choose to engage within a short duration. I personally think this is better, but I can see some fencer mains hating this change, so leave your feedback in the comments. Additionally, it will now no longer trigger from things like damage auras, including Aura of Suffering or Flame Dash, and it won't be triggered from objective attacks either now, so some serious rebalancing on this ability tonight. Lastly then, for the Apollo kneecapping, his flawless advanced hitbox was reduced by 10%. This is a further 10% reduction to the very generous hitbox of the ability we've seen since the hero shipped a few months back. As you can see in this before and after comparison though, it will still be dealing damage even if it's vaguely near hero models for the most part. So this will only fix the most egregious instances of unfair damage application. And as Apollo waddles away to nurse his broken legs, into the limelight comes Bebop. First and foremost, we've seen his gun damage receive a nerf to his bullet per boon growth, with the rate going down from 0.139 to 0.115. In a similar vein, his tier 2 variant of explosive uppercut saw its bonus weapon damage also reduced, from granting an additional 40% to now only granting 30%. Two nerfs there to overall gun bop damage output from the humble pie. However, Valve did slightly buff his sticky bomb damage, with the tier 2 AP upgrade power spike giving you 10 extra damage, going up to plus 85 damage instead of the previous plus 75. And as Bebop drops out of the spotlight, Billy crashes onto the scene. His health per boon was increased from granting plus 48 to now giving you plus 59, effectively buffing out the global vitality health reduction to all heroes in this patch. But his weapon damage was reduced, with the bullet damage per boon being reduced from 0.165 to 0.142. Kit-wise, we did see a few tweaks to his second ability, Rising Ram. The cooldown was increased from 30 seconds to 32 seconds, with the tier 2 AP upgrade of charge duration going up from granting plus 0.3 seconds to plus 0.4 seconds. And lastly, you'll get a lower overall cooldown even with the base value nerf when investing into the tier 3 AP upgrade, as it will now reduce your cooldown by a negative 13 seconds. Keep in mind, hitting a target with Rising Ram halves the cooldown as well. And as Billy high hoofs it out of here, Calico claws into frame. Only the one patch note here, and it makes sense. Gloombomb's tier 2 AP reward was overhauled. Originally, it would grant you a bonus of 16.2 additional damage. Then, a few patches back, they changed it to grant plus 75 damage to barriers, but of course this meant that there were some instances where this had no benefit to Calico at all. Instead, it now has a melee resistance shred ability, and will take away 5% melee resistance from enemies for 5 seconds per bomb. So this effect can be stacked up to pummel your foes to death. As Calico leaps away, our next hero Celeste flies into the notes. In a similar vein to Apollo, her hitbox was improved in this update, as you can see in this before and after comparison. Celeste's hitbox improvements seem to mainly focus on the upper body and head, whilst also having some slight improvements to her hands and other areas where it didn't fully cover the model. This should help you tapping her in the head as she darts around in lane. Additionally, she'll be spamming stamina usage slightly less regularly now, with her stamina cooldown being increased from 4.5 seconds to 5 seconds. In regards to her actual abilities, her free Radiant Daggers had its tier 2 AP power spike buffed. It will now grant you a negative 22 second cooldown reduction and an additional 80 damage, a 4 second cooldown reduction buff and a 10 point damage increase from pre-patch. And finally, her ultimate Shining Wonder saw the tier 2 AP upgrade reward also get a decent buff. You'll now get plus 70 damage instead of plus 50, so avoid the orb of social distancing now more than ever. As one door closes though, another door opens, and we can move on to our next hero, the Doorman. Multiple changes here to his primary damage ability, Call Bell. The radius of Bell was reduced by 0.5 meters, going down to 5.5 from 6 meters. With that 0.5 meter reduction being added to his tier 3 AP reward instead, so it will now grant plus 4.5 meters of radius expansion. The explosion damage spirit scaling ratio was also reduced by 0.1, going down from 1.4 to 1.3. The minus 100% weapon inaccuracy debuff will now also no longer diminish from 100% to 0% over a 1 second period. It'll instead last for the entire 4-second duration, however it will now only apply a -40% inaccuracy debuff to compensate. And there was also 2 changes to doorways. The ability to manually instantly close the doors is no longer possible, with them now having a sub-ability on an 8-second cooldown to force them closed, and the ability itself is now no longer unsilenceable, so some mechanical tweaks there. As the door fella sprints off to tilt someone else, the drifter arrives. 2 changes on drifter relating to his first ability, rend. The tier 3 AP upgrade had its 0.4 scaling increase removed, but it will now also deal heavy melee damage at a ratio of 0.55 scaling, a big day for punchers. Dropping away from the timeless vampire, Professor Dynamo arrives. This time around it's a couple of nerfs to kinetic pulse. The tier 2 AP power spike on the ability had its negative bullet resistance debuff reduced from being -18% to now being -15%. Alongside the spirit scaling of the ability also going down from 1.65 to 1.55. And the dispel on the tier 3 variant of quantum entanglement was changed from purging non-ultimate debuffs to instead reducing the duration of the effects by 50% instead. And as Dynamo relocates himself away, Darcy Graves falls into the patch notes next. She's had a decent increase to her base sprint speed, seeing a buff from 1.6 to 2.2. And to combat the rise of weapon-focused builds and playstyles on the hero, Valve slashed her bullet damage and growth by a flat 10% reduction. But they focused on some massive quality of life improvements and spirit-oriented ability buffs. Firstly, Grasping Hands got another big buff in regards to its summoning abilities. You'll now spawn a ghoul in the base ability, with the tier 3 increasing the number of ghouls spawned by 1. Jar of Dead also got a lot of tweaks that Grave mains will be overjoyed to see. They'll now be far better at following Graves, maintaining distance when she dashes, actually having fire rate buffs accurately applied to them, alongside being able to actually dash through veils, and calculating damage taken from outside of the damage fall-off range correctly. They'll even now have a small window of buffer before losing their targets, and they won't just go inactive if Graves dies whilst they're following her. And they'll have superior speed and acceleration when following Graves in out-of-combat scenarios for rotations too. Oh, and they fixed some broken instances of some projectiles colliding with the deadheads as well, like Grey Talon's owl. If you melee a target now, you'll be able to set the dash target for them to attack as well, so a lot of great quality of life tweaks there. But they did slightly nerf the spirit scaling of the deadheads themselves, going down from a ratio of 0.35 to 0.31. However, Valve do state that this is because they're actually far better at dealing damage now, so this isn't as big of a nerf as you'd think it would be. All in all then, some massive mechanical and quality of life tweaks to the deadheads that should have them feeling far better than before this update. Oh, and if you'd like to become a deadhead yourself and support myself and Daisy here at Dead Air, then why not join our YouTube members program and become a deadhead today? You'll even get your name featured in the end credits of episodes of Patch Notice. It's the most direct way to support us here at Dead Air, and we truly appreciate it. Right then, on to our next hero, Grey Talon. A whole load of changes here, all centered around his second ability, Rain of Arrows. The cooldown had a huge reduction, going down from 30 seconds to 22 seconds, with the cast delay of the ability also going down from 0.5 seconds to 0.2 seconds. However, the duration of the ability itself was reduced from 7 seconds to 4 seconds, with the in-air movement of the ability also being improved. Alongside this, the stamina distance was also changed from being a negative 9% reduction to a positive 25% increase. The weapon damage of the ability was also brought down slightly from +4 to +3, with a few subsequent AP upgrade tweaks too. The tier 1 AP reward was changed from a -14 second cooldown reduction to instead granting +3 weapon damage and a 30% movement slow for 1.5 seconds. With the tier 2 being changed from a +5 weapon damage increase and a slow to instead reducing the cooldown by 13 seconds, taking the total cooldown from 16 seconds to 9 seconds. And if you didn't know, split shot works on Rain of Arrows, so that's a lot of arrows you can fire out in a very short space of time with a low cooldown. Keep that one in mind, Talon mains. Sliding away from Grey Talon, the OSIC sends their regards, as Haze is next in the notes with a single change. Fixation's tier 3 AP reward of bonus weapon damage per stack was increased from granting plus 0.12 to plus 0.14 now. So build up those stacks and knock your enemies down. Moving on from the Dream Stalker, let's talk about everyone's favourite cowgirl, it's Holliday. 2 stat-related buffs here. Her base bullet damage on her weapon, Doc's Orders, was increased, going up from 18.8 to 19.7 base damage. With her health regen also getting a slight buff too. You'll now have 2 HP regen at base instead of 1. With those buffs in mind, she bounces off to fight crime and Infernus starts to mix things up next. An interesting one here that we've only seen happen a few times over the years of patches to Deadlock, the value that affects bullet size for Infernus was increased. This has been increased from 3 to 4, meaning that the bullet projectiles fired will be slightly larger in size and should be marginally easier to land on moving targets. And lastly, his ultimate, Concussive Combustion, also had a change to its tier 3 AP reward, with it now having an increased stun duration granted, going up from plus 0.75 seconds to plus 0.9 seconds. From fire though, we move on to ice, as it's Kelvin up next. The spirit scaling on Frost Grenade was reduced from a ratio of 0.7 to 0.6, with a logic tweak to Ice Path, meaning when he's interrupted on the ice created by the ability, he'll actually fall to the ground, rather than having an additional layer of ice created below him. And finally, they also made a rather large reduction to the DPS spirit scaling ratio of Arctic Beam, with it going down from 0.5 scaling to 0.38. Not so cold now. The Igloo Warrior aside, it's time for the Lash to crash into action. A welcome sight for players frustrated by Lash gun builds, they've reduced his bullet damage per boon growth from a ratio of plus 0.341 to plus 0.31. But they have rewarded players without fear of heights by increasing the ground strike damage per meter spirit scaling from 0.0372 to 0.04. And additionally, that bonus plus 7 weapon damage for 10 seconds granted by using grapple with the tier 2 AP upgrade has been tweaked so that the effect cannot be stacked, with it instead now refreshing the duration if cast again whilst actively buffing Lash. And you'll also get a bonus charge of grapple when unlocking the tier 3 AP upgrade now. Next in line for a round of tweaks then, it's mcginnis. Firstly, she's seen another round of minor buffs to her weapon, with the bullet damage per boon scaling ratio being increased from 0.17 damage per level up to 0.18. And for an interesting one, an old bug where Diviner's Kevlar would not proc when used with mcginnis' ult Heavy Barrage has finally been solved. So you'll now actually get the benefits of buying the item on ult-focused builds for Maggie, as you can see in this before and after comparison. And lastly, she'll also have a 0.5 meters radius increase on Medicinal Spectre. Here's the comparison of the new range on the ability, clocking in at 6 meters now. And as mcginnis clashes with Mina, let's focus in on the Vampire Queen and see what's changed on Mina. She'll now have a negative 8% debuff resistance innately, making her more susceptible to debuff damage. They also fixed some interactions with Rake not working on high ping, and additionally they've tweaked Love Bites, with it in turn affecting Nox Nostra in the following ways. Love Bites tier 3 AP reward will now grant minus 5 seconds of cooldown instead of minus 4. However, Love Bites will no longer be able to apply the flat damage on hit with your abilities, as this was causing 20% of its value as damage on Nox Nostra Love Bite procs. In the same vein, the tier 3 AP reward of Nox Nostra that grants on-hit current health damage dealt has been reduced by 0.5%, going down from 1% to 0.5, marking the third patch in a row that Nox Nostra has been nerfed following the bugged bats targeting being fixed a little while ago. Bouncing away from Mina Ha though, Mirage crashes into the patch notes next for one visual tweak. It's Jin's mark getting another round of graphical changes. This time they've changed the numbers displayed to highlight your stacks of the mark to instead be numerals depicted like chalk marks. Neat. What do you think of the new design compared to the old one? Let us know in the comments. Passing through the veil though, it's Mo and Krill up next. You'll no longer be knocked up and sent flying when hit via a heavy melee when using burrow, so that'll fix uppercuts displacing the burrowing mole. And the duration of Sandblast's tier 3 disarm will now be slightly longer, clocking in at 1.5 additional seconds rather than 1 second. Turning to our next page in the notes will bring us to Paige herself. Firstly, the tier 2 AP power spike on Bookworm has been adjusted to further reduce the cooldown, going up from -8 seconds to -12 seconds. And her ultimate ability got some big tweaks, with your tier 3 AP upgrade now granting you 160 extra damage, up from 135 before the update, with the cooldown on the ability being halved if it doesn't hit an enemy or an ally when cast, meaning you won't be punished if you somehow miss every player in the Cursed Apple when casting your cross-map stampede of horses. As Paige goes looking for the nearest library to raid, Paradox pulls up next. For Paradox, Valve continue to tweak the revamped Time Wall, giving the tier 1 AP reward an extra second of duration, taking it from plus 2.5 seconds to plus 3.5 seconds, with the tier 3 reward now granting you 2 additional charges instead of only 1, and the charge delay is also reduced from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. When it comes to her kinetic carbine, the tier 3 ability point upgrade will also now grant you 5% more max scaling damage, taking it up to plus 55% total. And lastly, her ultimate paradoxical swap will have its base damage upped from 125 to 150. Next in line for some nerfs on the docket, it's Pocket. Their Flying Cloak tier 2 weapon damage duration was reduced from 8 seconds to 6 seconds, with Affliction's cooldown also going up from 140 seconds to 150 seconds. So spraying frogs around the Cursed Apple will be slightly less frequent now. Enough about the heir to the Fairfax family fortune though, let's talk about Rem, Lord of the Remlings. Please don't feed him after midnight. Firstly, Pillow Toss had 2 changes. It'll have its charge time reduced from 9 seconds to 8 seconds, with the tier 3 AP reward being buffed from granting you plus 90 damage to now plus 100 damage. Now let's get into the tag-along tweaks, and there's quite a few. You can now chain the burst heal with it applying to secondary allies that you jump to. Alongside that, the heal duration was rebalanced to apply the same healing amount but over a faster duration, 2 seconds rather than 3. The tier 2 AP reward barrier and item duration and range increases were also buffed by an additional 10%. Here's a comparison of the radius increases on screen now. With alchemical fire looking pretty meta this patch, this could be great for urn fights as Rem. Additionally, the tier 3 missing health heal has also been improved, granting better regen and overall healing. And you can now cast tag-along through veils if your teammate passes through one, something that would have meant death for Rem pre-patch. The lockout period when ejecting from a teammate with tag-along is also faster now, making it feel far more responsive. And you'll be able to travel to your allies 50% quicker when flying towards them using the ability. All this and a lot of minor quality of life and functionality tweaks to the ability should overall result in it feeling a lot nicer to use and being better in its application. Lastly then, his ultimate nap time now also grants a base 30% damage reduction in the default level of the ability, with the tier 3 still adding that additional plus 50% damage reduction. Alas, as Rem sprints off to find somewhere to nap, 7 comes into focus. His bullet damage growth has been reduced from 0.374 to 0.337, whilst his crit reduction was increased from 35% to 55%, so he'll be taking less damage when you dump bullets into that massive head of his. Leading us to our next hero in tonight's breakdown, it's Shiv. Firstly, his Slice and Dice tier 2 AP upgrade was reduced from a negative 8% spirit resistance debuff to now only apply a negative 6% debuff. And additionally, Bloodletting had its deferred damage cleared reduced from 40% to 35%. With the tier 3 AP reward being buffed to compensate, with it going up from plus 45% deferred damage cleared to plus 50%. Finally for Shiv, his ultimate killing blow was changed in the following ways. The cooldown was increased from 105 seconds to 125 seconds, with the full rage bonus damage also being reduced from 14% to 12%, with the tier 2 AP rewards also seeing these 2 tweaks. tweaks. They upped the full rage bonus damage from plus 8% to plus 10%, whilst also reducing the cooldown of the ability by 30 seconds. So that tier 2 power spike is looking a lot more lucrative now. From shiv to silver, let's talk about the Wolf of New York. Firstly, as you can see in this before and after comparison, the bullet cycle time was reduced from 0.9 seconds to 0.85 seconds, with the overall DPS being adjusted to remain the same. But this 0.5-second decrease in cycle time does feel noticeably faster between shots, and should be a lot nicer for laning with soul orbs especially. Next up, Entangling Bowler had a few changes in regards to it no longer preventing enemies affected by it from jumping or mantling. They also saw the tweaked AP rewards of the ability, swapping the tier 2 and tier 3 rewards, with the tier 3 continuing to grant the ricochet effect. And then in wolf form, the Lycan Curse weapon attack fire rate was reduced from 80% to 65%, with the fire rate spirit scaling being increased from 0.25 to 0.45 to compensate. Dashing away from silver though, we arrive at Venator. His health was increased from 790 base HP with an additional 43 granted per boon, to instead be 830 base health with 48 granted per boon, meaning at maximum level with no items you'll now have 100 extra health, going up from 2295 at boon level 35 to now be 2395 maximum HP at boon level 35 after the patch. And additionally there was 2 tweaks to his hex line snap trap. The tier 3 AP reward had its damaged amp against revealed targets afflicted by the trap's jaws to be a bonus 30% damage instead of plus 25% bonus damage, with the tier 3 AP upgrade now also granting you an additional plus 1 charge. The Sword of St. Benedict aside though, let's talk about the undying creation himself, Victor. His base bullet damage has been reduced from 13 plus 0.3135 to instead be 12 base damage plus 0.26 growth, with his jumpstart tier 3 spirit scaling also being increased from plus 0.6 to plus 0.9. And lastly, Aura of Suffering also had its damage to objectives reduced by a flat 50%. So you shouldn't be melting through objectives as easily now on Victor. All that said, let's discuss the mighty goo fist of Viscous that's back in the notes. The tier 1 AP reward will now grant you an additional plus 20 damage, with the tier 2 no longer giving you the plus 30 damage increase, but in its stead it will now give you plus 40% lifesteal with 1/4 effectiveness against NPCs. So self-sustain on Viscous just got a new way to keep the goo boy alive. Wobbling away from Viscous though, let's talk about the Staten Island Queen herself, it's Vyper. Another 2 tweaks to her screwjab daggers here, focused on the ability point upgrades this time. The tier 2 bullet resistant shred per stack has been increased from -5% to -6%, with her tier 3 reward granting you an additional 2 max stacks, allowing you to get more out of chaining subsequent daggers together. As Vyper coils away, Warden begins his mighty crusade once again. Firstly, his very strong weapon saw its bullet damage per boon being reduced from 0.38 to 0.34, shaving some of the damage growth off the top, with his tier 3 debuff resistance on willpower now retroactively applying to currently existing debuffs when casting it, allowing you to use it around being debuffed instead of purely preemptively. And for Warden's Claw Game of Doom, you'll no longer be given the whopping 12 meters of additional cast range when unlocking the tier 2 AP reward. And that leads us to our 33rd hero in the patch notes tonight, Yamato. Firstly, Power Slash had its post-cast time reduced from 0.4 seconds to 0.2 seconds, halving the downtime, with the Spirit scaling being increased from 1.86 to 2.1. Then for Flying Slash, the base range of the ability was increased from 25 meters to 30 meters, so a nice 5 meter increase there. To compensate, you've lost the tier 2 plus 20 meters of cast range, but you will be granted a bonus 15 meters of cast range with the tier 3 AP reward. And additionally, on top of that, you'll get +2 charges when investing in the ability point upgrade too. They also made a targeting fix in related to Crimson Slash not being able to hit anything if you're aiming too high or too low. As above and so below for Yamato, her Shadow Transformation Tier 1 AP reward will also grant you more increased weapon damage, going up from +5 weapon damage to +7. And with all that said, that's all of the hero changes in tonight's update. So let's shift focus and talk about the new and improved Soul Urn. The urn had some of its biggest mechanical changes yet in this update, so let's give you the key facts. The urn will spawn on side lanes and must be deposited in the middle of the map, with the new urn delivery plinth above the blue lane bridge. To claim the urn, you'll need to melee it to collect it. Just standing near the urn will no longer pick it up. When carrying the urn, you'll no longer have your abilities silenced, so you can use damage dealing abilities when carrying the urn now. However, your weapon will be unable to fire, and you cannot use movement abilities like tag along on Rem. Keep in mind though, if your ability turns into a weapon based ability, like Venator's Era Domini, it will let you pull out the crossbow, but it won't let you fire it. They also tweaked the urn's return function. If it's left idle for too long with no players nearby, as it used to previously, it will scurry away, but now it will do so far faster and will not be interrupted in its pathing. It will go all the way back to its spawn. When you do get to middle and drop off the urn, it will begin a depositing phase. This will vary in length depending on if you're favoured, neutral or unfavoured in net soul worth as a team. Whilst the urn is depositing, the enemy team can heavy melee the urn to steal control of the deposit and make the urn switch sides, but this will add an additional 1.25 seconds to its deposit time. And all of the souls are now instantly awarded upon a successful depositing ritual being completed, rather than releasing soul orbs that could be denied. Mess around with it and get used to the new system. It will be encouraging fights by mid a lot more now, far more than ever when urns were ignored by a lot of players. Weighing up if you should contest a favoured urn is very important though, with taking time to farm or claim objectives being the safer option if a team is vastly ahead, as they'll be set up at middle to punch your lights out. We'll be uploading a short and some more in-depth coverage about the new urn mechanics soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that and get subscribed. Right then, let's talk about the more general changes next, like a general store. Firstly, as I mentioned in the intro, we saw a few very minor map changes. The outer lane fast rotate bounce pads that would get you from your blue lane jungle camps to the vales near green or yellow respectively have been removed, as they were being relied on too heavily for fast rotates to make up for poor macro it seems. Keep this in mind next time you try and save your yellow walker that's under attack, like it always is. In regards to movement itself, there's been a few adjustments here too. Sliding will no longer reset your sprint speed and require it to slowly ramp back up from base walking speed into sprint speed. You'll actually carry your sprint momentum out of a slide now. Stamina regeneration has also been reduced by 25% for 5 seconds after using a wall jump when in combat, but this won't affect out of combat movement, so it's a reasonable change on paper. Knock-up durations are now also affected by debuff reduction and treated as debuffs in that regard. And Valve also made the move speed diminishing returns point slightly higher, increasing it from 11 to 12, so you'll have very marginally better move speed scaling before hitting the point of diminishing returns on further investment speed demons. Next then, let's get the objective changes under the microscope. Firstly, Guardians had their resistance scale rebalanced from plus 75% resistance when the game starts that diminishes down to a negative 50% at 12 minutes, to instead now only be plus 50% resistance when the game starts with the same diminishing cap at 12 minutes. So effectively they'll just take more damage now at the start of games than how much damage they were taking pre-patch. Additionally, we've also seen shrines now become invulnerable until you destroy one full set of base guardians, alongside some tweaks to backdoor linger duration. This means that skipping base guardians to instantly take down shrines is no longer a viable strategy anymore. And once again, for the second patch in a row, bullet resistance on all objectives has been increased, with guardians, shrines, and walkers now all having increased bullet resistance, going up by 10%. In regards to Deadlock soul sources, medium neutral camps will now spawn at the 5-minute mark instead of 6 minutes, with breakables spawning in at 3 minutes now instead of 2 minutes, so you'll actually get 60 more seconds of laning before the nearby pocket runs off to do their box route. Next then, let's discuss the medic trooper changes in this patch. The heal duration itself has been increased in length, going up from 2 seconds to 4 seconds. The amount of heal remains the same, but the time to heal has been increased, so it won't be a sudden burst anymore. Additionally, multiple medic trooper healing orb stacking will now only increase the duration of the healing period, instead of the total healing value being added on top of one another. So you'll get a longer healing period rather than more heals. The healing percentage of banner trooper orbs was also increased from 12% missing HP to 13%, so a 1% increase there. Additionally, with this update having so much focus on encouraging multiple forms of melee play, Valve have also made adjustments to the parry VFX, and it will now more accurately reflect the parry state. So this should tighten up some instances of the FX not lining up with player inputs when parrying. Additionally, we've also got a lot of quality of life changes in regards to using the aim down sight zoom function. Previously, multiple abilities and items would have caused your field of view to be overridden when zoomed in, and using a spell or item for most of the abilities in the game, it would not maintain your zoom FOV. It would pull you in and then back out, whereas now it will more accurately track and maintain your zoom field of view if you're aiming down sights, tightening up some of the gunplay on heroes that track foes whilst aiming down sights. On screen behind has been a few comparisons of before and after on various abilities and items pre and post patch. Lastly then, let's talk about the new item and changes to some of the items of note in tonight's update. Outside of the new addition to the Vitality Tree in Grit, a low-cost, cheap and dirty active barrier item that can build into many of the game's barriers or shielding items, we also had a lot of tweaks and adjustments to item components and build trees, with some more unique additions like Mystic Expansion, the Spirit item, now building into Ballistic Enchantment, the weapon item, or Sharpshooter now upgrading from high velocity rounds and or long range, with Spiritual Overflow now also building from Spirit Lifesteal. So item components and combinations have been given a few varying trees and build paths to follow, so now you can really get the most out of your soul investment when buying certain items throughout a game of Deadlock. On top of this, of course, we've had the usual round of balance tweaks to a vast array of items in the game, so be sure to double check the notes to see if your favourite items are winners or losers in that regard. With that said though, that's basically everything you need to know to be equipped to re-enter the Cursed Apple, slap on your I Love New York hat and punch a rem in the face whilst they try and deliver the urn at middle. As always, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Patch Notice. Myself and Daisy were burning the midnight oil to get this one ready for you amazing deadheads who support our content here at Dead Air. We're getting close to 2 years since Yoshi shouted out our work on Dead Air way back in the official Discord, so thanks to those of you who have been along for this wild ride. And special shout out to the amazing YouTube members, of course, whose continued support allows us to do this full time. If you want to join these massive legends, become a member today. May positive elo come your way, deadheads. Don't forget, if you'd like to support us in other ways, subscribing is completely free. Right then, that's another Deadlock patch in the books. As always, thanks for watching Patch Notice here on Dead Air. It's time for myself and Daisy to duo queue some games and truly get to grips with the new meta that's dawning, so we'll see you at Blue Lane for the urn deposit. Bye bye for now.